You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You're listening to us on CBS radio station 1580 AM in the Washington, D.C. area, or on the web, WMClive.com, where you can also find links to podcasts of all our previous shows. And I want to hear from you. So tweet us at hashtag WMC Live, or email is womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com. Today's guests are a wonderfully motley crew. We start with a former CIA agent, honestly, who now works to combat trafficking. Then we hear from the online activist who founded the Everyday Sexism Project. Then from musical comedian Katie Goodman, who proves how much feminists do indeed have a sense of humor. And last, we talk with writer, pundit, and editor of The Nation magazine, Katrina vanden Heuvel. But first, we have to go inside the headlines. The verdict, yes. The verdict in the trial of George Zimmerman for the murder of Trayvon Martin. Like you and like much of the country, I was outraged at the blatant yet vociferously denied racism that saturated this whole affair. Zimmerman's original act, the public pressure necessitating the need to press charges, the jury composition without a single African American on it, all the implicits and dog whistles during the trial, the treatment of Rachel Gentile on the stand and the media ridicule of her afterward, and the verdict, and the dazzling speed of the verdict. I remember a conversation some years ago with a dear friend about both of us being feminist mothers of sons and the complexities inherent in that. I'll never forget ruminating out loud that I wondered how my son would turn out when he grew up. She, being African American, answered sadly that she wondered how her son would turn out if he grew up. I think of Trayvon's mom mourning her kid, his whole life before him, which she's done with such dignity. I can't help it. I think about the women, you see. I think of Marissa Alexander finally getting some sort of sideline attention while she serves 20 years in prison, convicted in 12 minutes by a Florida jury for firing a warning shot into the ceiling as her abusive former husband charged at her. She, too, claimed Florida's misbegotten stand-your-ground law as a defense, but she is black, and she is female, so, unlike Zimmerman, she did not walk free. Thinking about the women takes nothing away from my rage and sorrow at the loss of the unique, precious life-to-be of a 17-year-old young man who just got the hungries for a soda and some Skittles, only to be stalked and killed. But there's something else that must be said. And an African-American writer named Jamila Aisha Brown said it in The Guardian, UK, on Friday, the 12th of July, 2013. Read it. Go to Google it. Jamila Aisha Brown. The piece was called What If Trayvon Martin Had Been a Black Woman? And she took off from the jumping point of Piers Morgan had a guest, a male guest, and posed this hypothetical question. And the two men agreed with each other that black men are viewed as, quote, purveyors of violence and not as victims, and that they wouldn't be having this conversation because if it had been a woman, Zimmerman would have been convicted. She takes issue with that. She asks, what about the scores of unnamed black women whose killings have been ignored and all but forgotten? She points out that popular memory has virtually erased the lynchings of women. Mary Turner, Marie Scott, and Laura Nelson, and the 115 black women who were hung alongside their husbands, brothers, and sons in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. She calls it, referring Billie Holiday and referring Nina Simone, the strange fruit of a stranger sex that also dangled from southern trees. She points out there was neither sympathy nor outrage over the death of Deanna Cook Patrick, found dead in her bathtub 2 days after she called 911 for help in 2012. She had a known history of violence at the hands of her ex-husband. 3 times he'd been arrested for battering her and pled guilty And although she told the 911 operator that he had done this and had pled guilty, the dispatcher didn't mark her call as urgent or report it as a murder in progress. So when 2 police officers arrived at the home 50 minutes later, an hour almost later, they left when no one answered. She asks in her piece, does the name Rekia Boyd sound familiar? Only weeks after Martin's murder, Detective Dante Servin gunned down the 22-year-old young woman on the west side of Chicago. Yet she never made the media spotlight. She was just a passerby taken in the middle of the night by a single shot, and he faces no criminal charges to date. And 7-year-old Ayanna Stanley Jones shot to death as she slept on the couch with her grandma during a midnight SWAT raid on her home in 2010. Last month only, 3 years after her death, her killer, police officer Joseph Weekley, walked from a Detroit courtroom after a mistrial. No headlines, no protests. The victimization, Brown writes, of young black women is subsumed into a general well of black pain largely defined by the struggles of African American men. As a result, any insight about this vital intersection of race and gender is lost under the umbrella of a collective sense of persecution. If Trayvon Martin, she writes, arguing with Piers Morgan's assertion, had been a young black woman, no police chief would have resigned over a bungled investigation, no CNN host would be discussing the case of her accused killer, and we wouldn't be live streaming her murder trial. The reality is, we would probably never heard of her at all. Expectably, Brown was attacked by many for daring to raise the issue, as if by doing so she had somehow diminished Trayvon's death. Well, I bow to the courage of Jamila Aisha Brown, because we can mourn and rage over the killing of Trayvon Martin, and also note and mourn and rage over these killings. It's not either or, it's both and. And Jamila Aisha Brown clearly knows that if we are not for our sisters and ourselves, who will be? Now to our first guest. If you've seen the documentary Manhunt, the official Sundance film selection for 2013 about the real-life hunt for bin Laden, you've seen our guest featured in the film. Nada Bakos was a CIA analyst on the team working on the relationship between Iraq, Al-Qaeda, and the 9/11 attacks. I think what she's done since leaving the CIA is even more interesting. Welcome, Nada, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you for having me.
I want to ask with the question that probably you have been tediously asked 1,000 times before, and I do apologize, but this is coming at you from a more feminist and sympathetic point of view of when you compare the Hollywood version of women at the CIA, whether it's in the Bin Laden movie or any number of them, with the reality that you experienced when you worked at the CIA, what does or doesn't match up?
Men also probably deal with this because of James Bond, but you don't have a reference really for women working in intelligence as far as, public sphere and Hollywood. Most of the women that you see on screen are either seducing someone or, they're participating in a way that they're, some guy's number two. So I think that in and of itself makes it sort of a compelling story and of interest, particularly the documentary I was recently in, Manhunt, for HBO. I understand that why people are fascinated by the fact that women are actually in there doing this type of work. At the same time, over the course of time, being asked all of these questions and Q&As at these festivals, it was interesting to me. My reaction was starting to recoil from that because I'm thinking, of course women work at the CIA. How is that surprising?
Yeah. Well, you're up against the cliche stereotype of Mata Hari, I suppose, and of and the glamorous exotic other spy who is a sexual charmer, is a Jezebel, in all of that crap. And also, I might add, who can always run 60 miles a second in extremely high heels. I've always thought that's wow, but that I'm sure is only in the Hollywood version of you, not in the real life version of you. I would imagine you take your shoes off if you have to run.
Sometimes.
And probably a lot of it is desk work. I mean, but it's. Do you think maybe it'll be just that when enough women have surfaced in some public way, which isn't the common thing for anybody who works at the CIA, but people like you or Valerie Plame, or so that everybody stops falling over sideways and saying, "Oh my God, look, it's a woman." Maybe it will normalize.
I think that's true, and there's a variety of jobs at the agency. Women and men are in every single position. There's not like one position that women fill and one position that men fill. There's an operations officer job who goes out and recruits people to spy. Women and men do that job. There's analysts, women and men do that job. So I think wrapping our minds around the fact that it's just like private sector. It's a bureaucracy, and it functions in the same way a company would function. So it's not unlike that.
What brought you to work there? How did you get there?
I never really focused on the agency. I happened upon the agency. I'm looking around trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and my stepdad suggested applying. We're looking through The Economist, and he's like, "There's an ad. Why don't you apply there?" So that's actually how it happened.
You thought, what the hell? Well, what,
exactly.
Angelina Jolie makes it look really cool, so I might as well.
Right.
And how long were you actually there before you escaped to have a life after the CIA?
10 years.
Wow.
Approximately.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now you're a documentary producer.
I am working currently on a documentary. That will hopefully be coming out this year.
That's also very cool. And the other thing that I've heard, which I love breaking stereotypes, because stereotypes are what so much bigotry is always founded on. So a lovely stereotype breaker is that as a volunteer, just in your own spare time, you got involved in working on anti-trafficking causes. I mean, I don't mean to pin you down as an expert or anything, but just the fact that you were drawn to that issue is not what one would expect in the cliche or the stereotype of somebody who'd once worked at the CIA.
Right. Well, my mom, she's a clinical social worker, and my stepdad's a psychologist, and so I guess I've always kind of been around something, even I grew up on a farm, but I've always just had the mindset of, whether it was serving, as a civil servant for the government, or I've just sort of been instilled in me that you're supposed to help out other people. And the fact that these women are being trafficked around the world and for the, exploitation, to me, it's unconscionable, that this is happening on a daily basis. And when I look at things like our preparation for terrorism, and I see something like human trafficking and gun violence, I feel like we've become immune to the things that we're used to, the horrific things that do happen to people on a daily basis, but yet this unknown that's new to us is incredibly scary, and we spend lots of time and effort focusing on that. And I would just like to shift that pendulum back a little bit to focusing on things that truly do affect people on a greater scale.
Yes.
And one of that is human trafficking.
You're absolutely right. You're really right. You know that there are more people enslaved in sexual slavery now, today, than there were under all of slavery pre the Civil War.
I mean, that's astounding to me.
Yeah, and nobody pays that much attention to it,
Exactly, which is why I kept, just from a volunteer perspective, was trying to figure out how do we make people more aware of this and the fact that it's actually happening, and the fact that it happens on a local level. I'm just, talking to people that, neighbors that live around me, and making them aware of the fact that, this does happen in our community. Yeah. And they're starting to see, there's some awareness campaigns, which I find hugely refreshing, coming from cities, states, and I think that's great.
That is great, because I must say that the women's movement globally and individually in each country has carried the weight of this for so long by itself, with people saying you're crazy, it doesn't exist, or else women like it. Women want to grow up and be prostituted. Women want to grow up and be trafficked. I've literally been told it's one way that women migrate. Honest to God, it's a form of migration. They really want. I said, oh, that's terrific. I'm sure that was in the minds of the slaves when they were being moved from West Africa as well. You're going to die in the Middle Passage, but those of you who make it through will be enslaved for about 400 years. But hey, listen, eventually you'll turn out Colin Powell or somebody like that. So why don't you just shut up and be happy? But only with women would they dare say something like that. So
Well, and it's compounded by the fact that when they do find victims, like if law enforcement does find a victim, quite often she's so afraid to be able to take action and leave that person that she says no. She says no to help, and I think that makes it so much more difficult, especially for law enforcement.
That's right.
Because they're not. Then they don't start seeing that person as a victim. They see them. Then they're starting to see them as a prostitute, somebody willing to do this. But that to me is really, really paramount, that we start educating law enforcement on how to see the signs of a victim.
And how to see the signs of Stockholm Syndrome. They know it when they see it in a prisoner of war, and he's a guy, so they ought to be able to recognize it here. Anyway, it sounds to me like you have a wonderful and ethical and terrific life, probably even when you were in the CIA, but certainly since then. And I'm really grateful that you came and talked to us on Women's Media Center Live. Thanks so much, Nada.
Thank you.
We have to pause here for a minute. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'm Robin Morgan. Have you ever felt plain worn out, not only by the huge woman-hating issues like female genital mutilation and sexual assault and violence against women, but as much or maybe even more by the small, so-called normal, corrosive sexism we all encounter nonstop? Well, when we come back, we'll talk with the woman who decided to address precisely that. After Hurricane Sandy, parts of the East Coast have returned to normal, but others won't see normal again for quite some time. One group getting volunteers and aid supplies to those who need it is called Occupy Sandy. Made up of a coalition of Occupy Wall Street activists, community organizers, and technologists, Occupy Sandy is using social media and other software tools to identify and quickly respond to urgent needs among the hardest-hit communities. You can help. To donate or to volunteer, visit occupysandy.org.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
And we're back with Laura Bates, a contributor to the Women's Media Center's project Women Under Siege, as well as to The Independent and the Huffington Post. She's an online activist par excellence who has given us the Everyday Sexism Project. Laura, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you.
Well, it's lovely to have you on the phone all the way from England. I want to talk about the Everyday Sexism Project, which you founded. Tell me how it came to be, and tell our listeners just what it does. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. It came about quite simply, really, because of one week when I had several just bad experiences, this kind of thing that almost any woman can relate to, walking down the street being shouted at by guys in cars, being on the bus with a guy who started just brushing his hand up against my thigh, a few days later having really lewd sexual comments shouted at me by some construction workers. And I just suddenly realized if all of those things hadn't happened in the same week, I wouldn't have given a second thought to any one of them because they were so normal and I was so used to them. And that normalization really hit me. So I started asking other women, have you had experiences like these? And I was just blown away by the number of their responses. Every woman had not one story, but hundreds of stories. And like me, they'd never shared them with anybody before. So it was very difficult for people to see the scale of the problem. And the Everyday Sexism Project very simply just started out as a website where I asked women to just share those stories so we could open the world's eyes, really, to just how bad and just how wide the scale of the problem really still is.
It's a simple, brilliant idea. It really is, because sometimes the drama of certain situations like Afghanistan, like Saudi Arabia, or where the rape in India will be so dramatic they will make world headlines. But then people tend to react as if that's unusual. And actually, it sometimes is hard to see sexism against the backdrop because sexism is the backdrop. And what you've done is focus attention on that and also bring in every woman's everyday experiences.
Yes, and actually that's the thing that has really just amazed us, is just how universal it is. It really does seem to be every woman. We've had stories coming in. We had a 7-year-old disabled girl in a wheelchair and a 74-year-old lady in a mobility scooter who had almost an identical experience of shouted abuse about female drivers. We've had women in Mexico being told by their university professors that they look prettier when they shut up. Women in India on the tube having identical experiences to a younger woman in the UK of having a man pressing his erect penis into their back. The stories that are coming in from around the world are just so similar. There's this real sense of universality across borders and across women of all different race, sexual orientations, religious, non-religious, you name it. It seems to be a very universal problem.
Do women who write in their stories then network with each other, say in a similar, if they're in the same country or so, have actions, do you think, come out of this other than the basic one, which is knowing that you're not crazy, you're not alone, it's not your fault, all of the above?
Yes, that's one of the most wonderful things about our social media following. On Twitter and on Facebook, we have very lively public forums where when one woman writes in what her experience has been, within minutes she's flooded with support and solidarity and encouragement and help from other women, either in her area or around the world. And I'm really proud as well that in the UK, the impact of these things in the real world has also really started to take off, because we've got MPs now taking a really big interest in the project and actually using the entries in the project to inform their approach to things like sex and relationships education in schools.
Wow.
And we've also got the police. We're working very closely with two of the biggest police forces in the UK, the Metropolitan Police and the British Transport Police, and we've actually been able to use the stories that women have told us of sexual offences on public transport to help them better target their efforts to stop these kinds of offences happening. So it's really now starting to have a real world impact, hopefully to stop the next generation of women experiencing these same things.
My God, that's wonderful. So it can be used in effect as a crowdsourcing a voice for women to lobby without lobbying, just by relating this is what happens. Face it, when everybody is saying, oh, surely feminism is over and dead, and hasn't it all been won? I always say I must have been in the shower and missed it. If we've won.
Absolutely.
So this is a way of actually giving them a window into what we experience all the time, 24/7, and it's international. Clearly, what is its URL in the States? Is it the same URL?
Yes, no, it's usa.everydaysexism.com. We have 17 international branches of the project, and I have to say that the USA is one of the most active. The international branches have only been open for a few months, but we've already collected hundreds and hundreds of women's stories from America as well, so it seems to be going strong out there too.
My God. And this must take a lot of time and a lot of labor. How do you keep this going? How is it funded? How do you work with volunteers? Do you do this all yourself and just have given up on sleep? How does it work?
I have essentially given up on sleep, but I'm also incredibly lucky that women feel so strongly about this and about the voice it gives them that I receive emails every day from women around the world asking to help. And because of that, I've been able to create this incredible network of about 40 volunteers now all over the world who help with all different things, from running the different worldwide Twitter accounts to moderating the websites, to transferring data, and they're all 4 women who have contacted me through their own initiative just to say, this matters to me and I'd like to be part of it. So it's the most wonderful sense of strength and solidarity, and it really is a kind of collaborative action. So it always makes me smile, whenever I hear people talking about feminism as this backbiting or infighting movement. Nothing could be further from the truth in my experience.
Yes. Oh, you're living sisterhood as global, and it's utterly lovely. I congratulate you. You should be very proud of that day when you decided. Other women must be feeling this too, and changed history or whatever. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And we've got to go now, but say it once more. It's USA.
USA.everydaysexism.com.
That's for our U.S. listeners. And internationally, is it always the country before the Everyday Sexism?
Yes, but if you go to the everydaysexism.com main page, you'll see that at the top of the page there is a small flag for each country that's represented, so you can find your country just by clicking on the right flag.
Beautiful. It's the United Nations of pissed off women. I love it. Thank you so much, Laura, for what you're doing and for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you for having me.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. Well, there are 2 items today. The first is Iowa, where a court, the Supreme Court of the state, reaffirmed a dentist's right to fire a woman he found too attractive. Honest to God. The all-male court found that bosses can fire employees that they and their spouses see as threats to their marriages. This, they ruled, was not sex discrimination, but feelings motivated them, not gender. This is a case that was brought by Melissa Nelson, age 33, against Dr. James Knight of Fort Dodge, Iowa, who fired her. She had been a long-time employee, but he had been sending her text messages saying she was so attractive, and his wife learned of them and got upset. So his solution to this was to fire this long-term employee. Now, in the earlier December decision, the justices had said the issue was, quote, whether an employee who is not engaged in flirtatious conduct may be lawfully terminated simply because the boss views the employee as an irresistible attraction. But that language was removed from Friday's opinion. Okay, and the other surreal item is Mrs. Met. Now, you may know that most baseball, well, in fact, no baseball and football teams has a female mascot, with the notable exception of the New York Mets. There is Mr. Met, who runs around the field with a very large plaster of Paris head. And in 1963, in the yearbook, and then on the field in 1975, they introduced Mrs. Met. Now, Mrs. Met took her job so seriously she actually wed the man inside Mr. Met, John Bauman, and they stayed married for 25 years. Mr. Met was phased out for a bit and then brought back. Mrs. Met was phased out for a bit and has just recently been brought back. She reappeared in the stadium on last month in July. Now, you have to understand that, first of all, I'm a Mets fan. It is an exercise in masochism. But then again, I'm also a Knicks fan, so there you go. Those are my 2 teams, and it's just, well, you understand. So on the one hand, I'm proud that the Mets have the only female mascot in any league and in the sport. On the other hand, I have to say, 40 years of my life as an activist and a feminist was spent so that Mrs. Met could be on the field. I'll say this, she doesn't have to wear a 40-pound plaster of Paris head the way she did last time around. She has a foam head. This is, I suppose, progress. We have to take another quick break. This is still Women's Media Center Live, and I remain Robin Morgan. Katie Goodman, musical comic whose political wit makes you helplessly roll on the floor laughing, is coming up next, so don't go away.
When it comes to talk radio, men still do most of the talking. It doesn't get too much better if you look at television, newspapers, film, video games, social media, literature, sports, and corporate or technology leadership. The Women's Media Center's Status of Women in the U.S. Media 2013 report details the persistent gender disparity in a range of media institutions that rank among the greatest influencers in American society. To read the full report, go to womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
And are we ever back again? With us is Katie Goodman, the American musical satirist and comedian whose solo show called I Didn't Fuck It Up was a hit in New York and tours to packed audiences. She's the originator of Broad Comedy, a 5-woman troupe who perform musical satire and sketches. She was also founder and producer of the National Women's Theater Festival in Los Angeles in the 1990s and artistic director of the Philadelphia Women's Theater Festival. She's cut an album, and listen, her clips on YouTube will addict you to her work if you're not already hooked. Welcome, Katie, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you for having me.
I have to start by saying that I am an adoring, clutch my ribs, roll on the floor, tears running down my face fan. You not only put to rest forever the total myth that feminists have no sense of humor. If we had no sense of humor, we would have killed ourselves this way back in 1970, you know.
And I was only 2 then. So
well, there you go. But I bet you were pretty funny. And, of course, when you were 2, you were, even then, the daughter of Ellen Goodman, the Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist who is an old friend and was on the show just a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
And I first heard of your work from Gloria, who told me, said to me, do you know what Ellen's daughter is doing these days? This was a while ago. And I said, no, but I bet it's something good. And she said, go to YouTube and see this song called I Didn't Fuck It Up. And I thought I would die. It was so funny.
Thank you.
And since then, you have a beautiful voice, which is where the humor comes, because this wonderful coloratura will be trilling along, and what will come out of it in the words is enough to just make you die. So
I know it's completely wasted classical training.
Oh, it's not. It's so not. If listeners are not already addicted to you, they should go to YouTube immediately, where that song is there, and the probably gay song, and the I drunk dialed Obama song.
Yeah.
How do you come up with these? How did you become an American musical satirist, comedian?
Oh, God, through total utter frustration, I think, with the culture, where, anger spurs creativity, I guess. And it's, the only positive way I know how to deal with everything. So, as you said, we didn't all kill ourselves. But, I started writing, I was a comedic actress for 15 years before I really wrote anything. And then Bush came into office, and I had plenty of material.
Yeah.
And my husband and I write together, and we decided to write a feminist show for a troupe called Broad Comedy. And then I sort of pilfered from that show over the years, all the solos that I used to do, like while the girls were getting changed into other costumes, and then I created a solo show, which is what I'm doing now and touring around the world.
Oh, it's fantastic. And also, your bio says, I'm asking for a specific reason, that you're the author of Improvisation for the Spirit, Live a Creative, Spontaneous, and Courageous Life Using the Tools of Improv Comedy. Where do I get that? From your website?
Oh, it's on Amazon, yeah.
It is on Amazon, okay. Yeah. Because just last week, Jane, my pal and the co-founder of the Women's Media Center, Fonda, said that she had been working on a recent film with Tina Fey, plays her daughter, and that everybody was improvising comedy, and she knew how to improvise drama, but she had been totally awestruck by this, and she now wanted to take classes in improvisation of comedy. So I want to send her this book after I read it myself.
Yeah, it's a little bit more of a self-help book about how just anyone can use the tools of improv comedy in everyday life. So trusting yourself and knowing everything that you already need is already inside your head, and feeling like taking risks and finding your authentic voice. Very Jane stuff, the authenticity part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's interesting to me is that the improv comedy came out of a group that was doing improv exercises, and it just ended up being funny because it's so spontaneous and because you're talking about things that are so recognizable to each other that are coming from your own lives. You have to pull from your own life.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just sort of, make up something that doesn't have any meaning to you because you wouldn't even think to say it. And so the comedy, it's interesting. I can't even do drama improv very much anymore because it just sort of ends up being funny, because of this sort of surprise element to it. It's just sort of naturally falls that way.
Well, the saying, dying is easy, comedy is hard.
That's right.
Tell me something. I've asked the same question of Kathy Najimy and of Kate Clinton. Do you think there's a difference in feminist humor or from patriarchal humor or male humor? Many male comics will say there's absolutely no difference. Comedy is comedy. No,
there is a difference. Kathy and I have had this conversation too, actually. But one of the differences, there's certain things that are not funny for women to do, and a lot of it revolves around victimization stuff. So sometimes women are incredibly self-deprecating, or it's super painful. It's a lot less funny.
That was the Phyllis Diller approach, I think.
Yeah, God, she was great.
Yes.
And do you know what's so interesting about her is that she was, under all that makeup and that get-up, she was gorgeous, and she really downplayed that because in that time,
right,
her beauty would have undermined her. I just find this so fascinating. Would have undermined her sort of intelligence and humor, and nobody would have taken her, quote unquote, seriously as a comic.
Right.
So she sort of did that whole thing, which is also interesting. So you have the way you look as a female comic is not. I don't mean the word important. It says something about you as a comic, whereas with men it doesn't really.
That's right.
But at any rate, I just think that because women are in the weaker position in society, to do victim-y humor is harder. And that's why, in some ways, I think that's why rape jokes, this is the year of the rape joke, as we all keep calling it, but has taken so long. And I think it's actually a really good sign that we're doing rape jokes. This is a horrible conversation, but you know what I mean?
No. But when women do rape jokes, it's a very different rape joke from when men do it.
Well, and that's why the guys are getting in trouble doing it in the first place. Their walk, it's much harder for them because of the assumption that not that men can't experience rape, but when they're usually talking about it, they're talking about male on female rape. And so, when Sarah Silverman does it, it slays me. It's hilarious.
Well, it's all about who the target is, too.
Exactly,
and of course, in your work, the target is the patriarchy. The target is bigots and bigotry. If you're homophobic, it must be because you're really secretly gay. And there's such a distillation in the lyrics, and that combined with the utter seriousness and the beautiful voice of the delivery is just murderous. It's it's so wonderful. What are you planning on doing next? What's coming up?
Well, we just launched our first web series called Bench Warmers, and it's about 4 soccer moms sitting on a bench, and their kids are just out of earshot, and they're basically talking about sex. And it's a very sex-positive piece. There's 11 3-minute episodes, and there are pieces that we've been doing live with broad comedy around the country for 10 years. And my husband actually, and I write them. He listens to us when we go out after a show and we're having drinks and we're talking smack about sex and all this stuff, and he's seriously taking notes on a napkin, in the corner without us seeing, and then we go back and we write these things.
And you write, yeah.
And what I love about it so much is it's things like there's no female word for blowjob. Oh my God, that's totally unfair, and it's this long feminist conversation about it. So it's funny and silly and a little bit base, but at the same time it's sort of this highbrow intellectual conversation because these women are really smart and they're really strong and they all they like sex, even though there's sort of a prissy one. She actually is the one who tells the rest of them about the best vibrators and things like that. So I love knocking down those stereotypes, and it's been really interesting because our producer was going to HBO and Showtime to see if we could turn this into a series, and the very first reaction she got was, "This is not ad-friendly." Her name's Adrienne Becker, and she wrote this really great piece for Huffington Post about how she put together a compilation of all the quote-unquote ad-friendly male sitcoms, 2.5 Men, How I Met Your Mother, where they're talking about masturbation as, with euphemisms, but right in the scene, it's like, happening in the next room, and they're talking about it and how that's perfectly ad-friendly. But when moms talk about it,
that's a different matter entirely.
Yeah, it was a really interesting experience we're having with it. But it's pretty popular. We finally put it on YouTube. So that just started there. Benchwarmers. Yeah, benchwarmers.tv is the best place to go, or KatieGoodman.com on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is actually called Broad Comedy. It's not called Katie Goodman.
Okay, so we have a YouTube channel called Broad Comedy. Yeah. We have Benchwarmers, and your own website where people can get you've cut a record as well. Yes. Yeah,
my CD and my tickets are there for wherever I'm coming in the country, and all different things. I have a podcast that they can sign up for there, and also the Benchwarmers link is there as well.
Queen of media, my God. Okay.
I know.
And the website is just www.katiegoodman.com?
Yeah.
Okay. So now you know where to find her, dear listeners, and treat yourself, because it's a dark and gloomy world, and this woman is an absolute beaming little sunbeam of feminist delight.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you so much, Katie. I hope we meet someday. I'm going to get the book for Jane, and I look forward to your next performance.
Thank you so much. Yes, you have to come say hi.
You bet. This time I will.
Okay.
Thanks for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. And it's time for another break. Yep, I remain Robin Morgan here at Women's Media Center Live. And we'll be right back with a woman you've seen and heard lots on TV, analyzing the news from a progressive point of view. Katrina vanden Heuvel writes, edits, comments on politics, and is our next guest.
Want to stay informed when there are changes to Social Security? Subscribe to receive automatic email updates on popular Social Security web pages with the click of a button. Just visit www.socialsecurity.gov/GOV delivery. More than 1 million people already receive updates to the pages they're most interested in. You can too. Look for the red envelope followed by a link that says Get Email Updates. To learn more, visit www.socialsecurity.gov/GOV delivery. Social Security delivers.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
Welcome back again. Katrina vanden Heuvel not only edits that venerable newspaper of the left, The Nation, but she writes a weekly web column for The Washington Post, and as editor or co-editor, she's published numerous books. Furthermore, she's a frequent commentator for political talk shows on ABC, CNN, MSNBC, and PBS, often the only woman on the pundit panel. Oh, Katrina, welcome, very welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you, Robin. I'm honored to be part of your show.
Well, we're honored to have you here. You pundit away for the big time, and so we're delighted that you're punditing now for us. In fact, I have to start with a personal question, because I've wanted to ask you this for a long time. You sit there, often the only woman on the panel with all boys, usually pale males, and there's you holding up the banner of all things progressive, and no matter what moronic troglodyte things they say, you never lose your cool. I've seen Andrea Mitchell get flustered and angry.
Have you?
but you never.
I do. I lose my cool inside. But I also come to those tables with a strong sense of conviction about what I believe in, not to, just to speak my piece. And I also understand how little space there is.
Yeah.
That, in giving me a seat at that table, I hate to say giving me, but you look at these stats on these shows, especially the Sunday shows, they still remain widely conservative, pale, male, and stale.
Yeah.
And you have a chance. And so I go there not to tussle so much with a Karl Rove or George Will, which I have, but to speak and maybe say something that people out in the country, will say, hey, that clicks with me, and try and be, to bring a little sense of life and reality to these tables. So that's my sense. Like on joblessness, we were, talking earlier.
Yeah.
Those issues don't get talked about. It's all kind of this abstraction about the statistics, and it's all going pretty well. But there's such a detachment from not just the pain in this country, but the reality that millions of people are living.
Yeah.
So to speak to that, to me, I think maybe quiets my agitation.
Well, it also shows a sense of real discipline. When you started by saying, when I go on these shows, I go something like prepared to or before the show, and I thought you were going to say take Valium, and instead you said realizing the context, and you're absolutely right. But it's a heroic discipline that you employ, because I would have looked around and said, I'm a pacifist, but the things I see when I don't have my Uzi handy,
Right.
Oh my God!
But it is the case that So I've always believed that media plays a critical role, because media, maybe the greatest single power in politics. It's the power to define reality, to determine which issues matter, right?
Absolutely.
And which viewpoints deserve a hearing. So you go on these shows, you can see the way they frame the show, what they're going to give a hearing to, what they think is important. So whatever one can do to pierce a little bit of that armor, to open it up, because there are many more ways of speaking to people. They're different. There's a different media today, right?
Yes,
but
there is.
There is, and I mean I think radio is one of the great underutilized formats. But still, television remains a place which kind of shapes the agenda, so
That's
to speak.
right.
So
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but the new every year regularly we come out with the Women's Media Center, being we come out with a guide to the status of women in the media, and every year it can curl your hair. It just is amazing. And
the numbers, the numbers are miserable, and then the range of views. I mean, I love, for example, think of Wendy Davis in Texas, right?
Yes.
A state senator.
Yes.
That was thrilling. But one of our former Nation interns works at the Texas Tribune, which was part of the story, Robin, because if there hadn't been a live stream, which there is, right, out of the Texas State Legislature, but also Texas Tribune was live streaming it, millions of people. That's right, millions of people, women. That's right. So to me, what that showed is when someone speaks up, and Wendy Davis speaking up, as she did, sparked a feeling in this country, around the world, about among women, among people of conscience, and it kind of showed what the future of pro-choice activism could be, but not to be quiet, right?
Yes.
Because I think to be quiet and to sort of accept the terms as they are and to go on the defensive simply because you don't, quote, have the votes, but getting off the defensive means caring about more than just the vote count.
That's
it
right.
means don't fight on the opposition's terms. So I think there's also that instinct in all of what we try to do.
That's absolutely true, but you're also quite right, because if you can't get the word out, the most wonderful action goes nowhere. I mean, that's why we started the Women's Media Center, because we were tired of throwing shoes at our television sets, and I scream back at the radio or the television, So, and we've been able to make a dent, but there's a lot of work to do. Anyway,
there's a lot of work.
Anyway, I want to get on to a couple of things with you. You're a Russia expert. I want to ask you what the hell is really going on there. You're a jobs expert that you don't get to talk about all the time, and it is crucial. And also the nation, is it 150 that it turns this year?
It will be 150 in 2015, not too far off.
Wow. Well, why don't you start with that and tell me about the celebrations for that?
So, part of the nation will turn 150. It was founded by abolitionists committed to the ending slavery. But what we hope to do is bring to bear our history, our kind of alternative independent history, to bear on the present. Because we were formed by those invested and involved in social movements, in independent, dissenting, muckraking politics. And I think so many of the themes that animated us in our founding continue today: opposition to war, opposition to imperialism, support for women's equality, civil rights, civil liberties. So we're going to go out on the town in New York City. We hope to do an evening in Central Park, which, by the way, one of our founders was the architect of Central Park. We hope to go to about 10 cities around the country, come with the documentary film Barbara Koppel, the great filmmaker, is making about the nation, and just come into town, partner with great people in those towns and cities, bring our writers of all generations, and just kind of say, hey, we're here. We're strong, we're vital, we're one of the few long-standing institutions of the progressive democratic left in this country. It's pretty hard, as you know, Robin, to build and sustain institutions to bring about real change.
Sustaining is the real crunch.
So we're, the sense of surviving, sustaining, and continuing in a vital way is what we hope to introduce and introduce us to a new generation and reintroduce us to all people who have lapsed.
Happy birthday. And when the actual festivities begin, will you come back and talk again and publicize it? Because we want to get behind that. Now, we've only got about, let's say, 3 minutes left, frustratingly, but talk a little bit about Russia, because you're the Russia expert that I trust.
No, there's no Russia. I'll tell you, I've been going for more than 30 years. With Putin, just think of this. The first act Putin committed was to give Yeltsin and his family immunity. I think that rings for people who remember the Nixon years. Yes. Putin is a man who is a nationalist. He is someone who has reasserted Russia's role in the world, in the geopolitics. Yeah. But interestingly, he's kind of this culture warrior. He's playing off of... He has an alliance with the Russian Orthodox Church in many ways.
I know.
And look at what's happened with Pussy Riot.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that was an expression in many ways of this kind of rising right-wing nationalism in Russia, which, by the way, Putin is not the most right-wing or the most nationalist, but there's a fusion with the Russian Orthodox Church, which is chilling. And I, many years ago, won a Planned Parenthood award for an investigative piece I did on how James Dobson and Focus on the Family and the right-wing anti-abortion, anti-choice forces were coming to Russia. They are there in new form. So I think Russia is a very tormented, interesting place. Opposition in the streets is healthy. The print press is far more robust than people understand. But it's a complex picture. And I think the only thing I'd say is I do think we need to understand it's a complex political society. A lot of interests, a lot of struggles. It's not as monolithic or Putin-led as many think. But the women, there's a lot of strong organizing now. Pussy Riot was important in many ways to kind of reassert the role of women, of feminists.
Right.
So it's an interesting time.
It's a very interesting time, and watching Obama and Putin, sort of make their moves on each other. Yeah.
They now have Edward Snowden to deal with. How they resolve that will be some measure of the relationship.
You think? Yeah. I'm so frustrated because we have to go. But will you promise you'll come back and talk more?
Absolutely. Thank you, Robin.
Oh, thank you, Katrina, for everything that you do all the time and for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. Thanks so much. And now it's time for Fighting Words. Some of you may remember that just a few weeks ago, former President Jimmy Carter took a stand saying that religious leaders, including the Christian and Islamic ones, share the blame for mistreatment of women across the world. Well, the heart leaps up at this. If you look at some of the fine print, not so much. Carter said that religious doctrine, which he described as theologically indefensible, which actually is not true because it's right in the theology, contribute to a political, social, and economic oppression of women. Quote, there is a great aversion among male leaders and some women leaders, to admit that this is something that exists, that it's serious, and that it's troubling and should be addressed courageously. He had formed, an international conference on women and religion, hosting representatives from 15 countries at the Carter Center, and it was called the Mobilizing Faith for Women event. Emphasizing to world leaders that religious institutions can be forces for equality, he said. I have a little bit of an oops there, because, I don't believe it. But nations represented include Afghanistan, Botswana, Egypt, Iraq, Malaysia, Nigeria, Senegal, and the Sudan, etc. So that's encouraging. What's not encouraging is that he kept referring to Paul, the Christian apostle, credited with writing much of the New Testament outside of the Gospels, and he quotes Paul saying, "There is no difference between Jews and Gentiles, slaves or masters, man or woman." Well, Paul also said, "Better to marry than to burn," and went on to say, if you can do away with women in your life entirely, you're best off. That's another oops. The point, said Carter, is that these voices demanding these circumstances change are few and far between. Now, this is the part that really does irritate me somewhat, because I'm all for people jumping on the bandwagon. But the women's movement has been at this, depending on when you start counting, this go round for 50 years. And it's a little irritating that when people jump on the bandwagon, they act as if they just invented it. It's the old falling on a platitude with an air of enormous discovery. So I applaud him for his stand. He and his wife recently dissociated themselves from Southern Baptist, walking the walk, citing that the Southern Baptist Church had a prohibition on ordaining women or allowing them to serve as deacons or other leadership posts, and that his wife, Rosalind, is now a Baptist deacon. So that's all to the good if you want to be a Baptist deacon. But I just wish he got it a little clearer. Maybe he's on the way. One can always hope. That's what feminists die of, hope. And that's it for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS station, I'd still go on hoping, 1580 AM radio in Washington, D.C., and on the web at WMClive.com, which also has podcasts of previous shows. Remember to email us at womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com or tweet us at hashtag WMCLive. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program Executive Producer Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams Chancellor, Technical Director Michelle Kinsey Bruns, and our founding sponsor Regina Kulik Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thank you for being with us. Join us next week. After next week's program, we're going to take a hiatus for the month of August. So next week's episode will be our last until September, and therefore it is a whopper of a show, including our getting to eavesdrop on a most interesting conversation between two young women, one African American and one a Latina, on what the upcoming 50th anniversary of the March on Washington means or doesn't to them. Only here on the Talk Show with a Brain, Women's Media Center Live.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.